Alright, so today I want to go into more detail about a complaint I mostly have with the Silent Hill 2 remake as a whole. Straight out of the gate, I do want to be clear, this is not like an issue that everyone's going to have. It's not an issue that ruins the game in any way, it's nothing to do with that. It's just something that I have an issue with. I'm sure people who play a lot of these games have issue with too, maybe. And that is the overall kind of combat and difficulty of the game. I know it's such a small thing to complain about, because this is not me trying to find something wrong with the game. I genuinely think it's one of the best remakes we've had in a while, but it is the main sticking point for me that I don't necessarily think is that good. Now, what I mean by combat is not necessarily how the combat works. I think the combat is surprisingly smooth. I was always concerned with it at first when they showed it was like a dodge melee mechanic, and I was like, okay, this can get really annoying, but I think that's mainly off the back of Callisto that did that, and it was terrible in that game. But no, in this game, the combat feels very good to do. But I'm talking about the difficulty of the combat and how hard the game is. So in my review of the game, I went over this briefly, and I said, my first playthrough, I went through on standard, and the puzzles were fine. Some of them are easier than others, some of them take a bit more thought, but that's fine. But the combat, there was no stakes at all. Like, there was no, oh no, I'm going to die moment at all in the game. And healing as a whole was way too generous. Like, there were so many healing items around that you just didn't ever need to struggle to find one. If you ever got to a danger state, you'd be like, okay, let me just pop one of my 50 healing drinks, and I'm good to go. That's probably an exaggeration, but the point is you get a lot of healing in this game anyway. And after going through the game again, recently on hard, it's still the same. Like, it's still the same, but if you go through on hard for the second time, I definitely think it's easier to manage. Obviously the difference is being enemies are more aggressive, they hit harder, they take more time to kill, that's about it. But the thing is with the difficulty, if you played it through and you know how to deal with certain enemy types, they become a non-issue, really. Now, anyone who's played survival horror games enough knows that usually on a second playthrough, you'll go, okay, I know where I need to go, from A to B, there's an enemy here, 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 and here, I can probably run past all of them and not worry. And yeah, I did do that on a second playthrough. Like, I don't need to worry about killing everything I see, because I know where to go, and I know where things aren't in the way. So that's just what it is. Like, that's always the case with a survival horror game. But when you do have to fight, it's still the same kind of formula, because the dodge is very, very strong in this game, and enemies have very obvious moves they do, and you can kind of predict them very well. And if you play the game enough, you'll learn what order of attacks they do, how quick they are, and when to dodge, like at the last moment possible. And then it becomes just a case of remembering that. Again, that's not really a complaint. The enemy variety is not that huge. Most things are just kind of melee focused, and they can't really do anything. I would say, again, same thing with standard. It's once you get to the hospital and you get the nurses, that's when it gets a little bit more tricky, because they're faster, they take more damage, and they hit harder. So that's when it gets more difficult. But again, at that point, once you get the handgun, you don't really need to use the handgun. And then at some point during the hospital, you'll get the shotgun, and you can literally just shoot them. Literally, most of the time, on either run I did, I only ever used the gun on boss fights and on nurses. The rest of the enemies, melee only, no problem, because they're so easy to kind of predict, and you know what they're going to do. While we're on the topic of boss fights, I will briefly go into boss fights, but this is pretty much a given for every survival horror game there's ever been. If you've played any of the RE games, if you've played any of the old Silent Hill games, or this one, or pretty much anything in the genre, you'll know that the boss fights are usually not all that in-depth, It's just shoot it in a weak spot, or shoot it wherever you can that's vulnerable until it dies. Pretty much the same case here. Obviously with the first Pyramid Head boss fight in this game, you can literally just wait the timer out and he will just leave. So you can, especially on hard mode, you can just save a load of resources and a load of time just ignoring him basically and dodging him at the perfect times, and you'll be fine. And that really does save you a lot of ammo. Obviously using the guns and hitting the enemies does speed up that fight, but it's still not necessary to do so. And if you're trying to play through the game in a more resourceful way, yeah, don't do anything to him, just wait for him to leave. The rest of the boss fights, against Maria and against Abstract Daddy, it's all just really easy. They have very predictable moves, you know what they're going to do, and they're pretty big targets, so you can't really miss, because unlike Resident Evil where you have like a glowing weak spot that's a bit smaller, it's just shoot the boss, and that's about it really. But yeah, I just find the overall kind of stakes in combat is very, very low in this game, with healing and enemies being easy to deal with, and that's not like, this is not a huge complaint. It's really not. Like, I've played all of these games, and I can tell you now, while the combat in 2 is probably more so than some of the others, I never really thought these games were about the combat, you know? Like, Resident Evil, okay, the whole point is dealing with bioweapons and stuff like that, so you're going to be fighting monsters, but with Silent Hill, I always kind of consider the combat to be such a secondary thing. You know, you're not there to fight monsters, you're there to kind of find out what's going on and unraveling the mystery and stuff like that, so it's not really a forefront, so I kind of do forgive it there, because outside the combat, I think this game is absolutely fantastic. Atmosphere, story, it's just like the original, and it's so good, but the combat just doesn't feel all that. There's obviously things they could do if they were going to improve it. There are things they could do. They could, you know, make a different difficulty where, you know, healing items and bullets are just not as often found. That would make it more kind of worthwhile to pick your fights and be careful on not getting hit or stuff like that. I don't know if I'll add any more like difficulty options and stuff like that. It's just a thought. It could be cool. Now, I have been kind of messing around with the difficulty in my own time, like trying to do things in a certain way, and that seems to make it definitely more engaging. Like, there's an achievement where you can't use any guns, no firearms allowed, and that's very engaging, that's very fun, because you are strictly down to melee, so bosses feel more intense, nurses are more difficult to deal with, and that makes it a lot better. But there's not a lot you can really do to change the combat, you know, it's still the same, so there's that. But yeah, I guess kind of to sum up, my issue with the game is, you know, as someone who likes to play these games in a more challenging manner, like you've seen half the content I do on my channel, it's just me playing through the games in ridiculous ways and restricting myself and stuff. You can't really do that to an extent in this game as others, because it is so easy, I guess. And don't get me wrong, this is not the only game I've had that issue with, like Resident Evil Village, for example, difficulty-wise, massive letdown. Like, standard was a joke, hardcore felt like normal, and Village of Shadows was such a downgrade compared to Madhouse, which was probably my favourite difficulty mode in any Resident Evil. But it's not something everyone has a complaint with, and, you know, at the end of the day, people have different experiences with these games. I've seen someone on Twitter's post, like, a couple days after launch, that they'd done their first playthrough and died like 90 plus times. Is that an exaggeration? Probably. Was there a results page tied to this post? No, so we don't know. But if it was true, that's fine. Like, not everyone's going to be as kind of inexperienced, I guess, with this type of game, and, you know, difficulty is very much, you know, a preference thing. Like, maybe some people find standard too easy, so they play on hard. Maybe hard's too easy, or maybe normal is too hard, and they go down to easy. Like, it's completely down to the player. But yeah, that's just kind of my own thoughts. As someone who plays these games in ways to make it more challenging, this game doesn't hit that bar. But yeah, in every single other way, it absolutely smashes it. Like, I'm not digging at the game, this is not something to try and find a reason to not like the game, this is just my own issue with it. And maybe they'll add something later down the line that makes that more appealing, makes the difficulty more intense. But if not, that's fine. I still love the game, I still play it through, I'm still playing it through right now, I'm on like my 3rd run already. It's really enjoyable. So it's not a way to find something wrong with it, it's just something I don't necessarily think was done well compared to other things. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap it up. Leave your own thoughts on that whole topic in the comments. Do you think the game is too easy? Do you think you found it quite a struggle? Do let me know, because everyone has their own kind of preference on that kind of situation. But yeah, thank you for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.